everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation, and also the host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Rodhmir Labadie, who is the founder of 40 Launch. Rod, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And just for disclosure for the people, the audience members, Rod and myself did go to school at one point in time, many light years ago, right?
Hard to
and
believe it.
and it's an honor to have you on and to hear your story yet again, right? But also for our community. But do us a favor right now, Rod, if you could just do me a favor, just kind of let the individuals know a little bit more about your cultural background and where you grew up.
Absolutely. Thanks for that wonderful intro. I grew up in Connecticut, it's a small state by New York. I'm the son of two Haitian immigrants. They immigrated into the United States in late 70s, early 80s. Um, and I have one younger sister, fantastic partner in crime. Um, she was about 4.5 years younger than me. So yeah, grew up in Connecticut, did a lot of my schooling in Connecticut, um, and I currently reside in New Jersey and I'm working. I have an office in New York City.
Hmm. And you mentioned you said both your family members' parents are Haitian.
That's correct. Both of them are
Okay.
Haitian.
And
Yeah.
what a part of Haiti?
My father's from a small town called La Colline, in the south of Haiti, and my mother's from Ravin, which is uh, just across the way on this on that lower arm of Haiti, also in the south.
Okay.
Yeah.
And could you express a little bit more to the community about the Haitian culture, right? I know a lot of the individuals that have come on the podcast and express about the Haitian culture. You know, they broken it down to several different key words, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah. Uh, it's a great question. I'd say that, the Haitian culture is a combination of a lot of blending and a lot of like overcoming, right? The island of Hades was populated by slaves that were brought over, right? That's a large popul representation of the population. Also, there's the Taino that were the indigenous people of that space. Um, there's the French that were there. There are Polish that fought as mercenaries with the French, and some of them stayed. There's actually an Arab community in Haiti. Um, and you're really talking about a region that's intermingled, seen that's been born out of overcoming oppression, right? And so you see that in the culture, in their resilience. I can see some of that in me, in their ability to find ways to overcome, survive, um, push forward in the face of adversity. And at the end of the day, I don't think there's any adversity that's greater than being ripped away from your home and made to not be able to be perceived as a human being, right? And so the country is born from a lot of that that ethos, the philosophy that drives Haitians day to day, and I'd say that persists to today, is that they are always trying to make their existence real and as permanent as possible. And they do that with the tools that are available to them. So sometimes it seems admirable, sometimes it might seem um, not so, but ultimately it does not come from a place of malice. It's a warm culture. If you go to Haiti, um, you will be met with kindness and thoughtfulness, and people do care. And just like anywhere else, you have scenarios that they're not the right place for you to be if you're not part of that community, and that's born from their perception of what their reality is. So I could start there as saying, like, foundationally, hey, the Haitian culture is massively inclusive, very diverse, very very much a culture that embraces others. Um, but there's also standards, and that standard is stratified across the different classes that exist there, because there is a wealth disparity. There is a meaningful diaspora that has expectations of their progeny in ways that you have to uphold a certain level uh, of meeting a bar, right? Meeting a bar that whatever your parents set. There's a traditional terms that you probably hear across different cultures, right? Doctor, engineer, whatever, right? But also they want a sense of connection for their kids that helps tether them in their culture through their lens. So I grew up Roman Catholic, but I have family members that are Jehovah Witnesses, Seventh Day Adventists, other faiths, and it doesn't matter what we do. We always try to go home, right? And especially when you're born from a place where you don't have that deep-seated understanding of longevity and ties to your generations behind you. It becomes very important to tether yourself in something that's profound, and a lot of that is very much in the culture as well.
I love how you're breaking that down on a deeper level. You know what I mean? Like obviously it could be anywhere like, oh, it's just a beautiful island. Come visit it, right? Got some great food and great culture, right? But you're really diving in deep. I like how you broke in what's really on the island of Haiti, the various different cultures and backgrounds and how it's like a melting pot in some kind of way. So what some individuals might see on TV and obviously here within the tabloids and all the craziness that they always depict on certain places. They get to you're hearing it firsthand from you saying that it's more than that. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful island, but it also has a wide range of individuals that are there that share that land and actually, work well together, on
Absolutely.
could you talk a little bit more about like the upbringing? I know you said you had your sisters, yourself, you have your parents, but your upbringings, where you grew up, like the household, like how was it like growing up in a Haitian household, and like how did that background like kind of shape some of your um, opportunities that have come up for you in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, so, at a very young age, faith was really important to my parents. I grew up in a two-parent household. My parents are still married, and I'm very fortunate that that's the case. We grew up in a two-bedroom apartment, the four of us. I uh, I shared a bedroom with my sister up until, you know, kind of like puberty, where, you have to start separating the kids because, we have different needs and we go through. So my sister actually, they partitioned my parents' room, and they gave me a room, and my sister a room. Um, and we grew up in going to like Catholic schools. My whole life, a lot of private schools. And a big part of that is, again, being very much integrated with our faith. A strong anchor point where I was the Catholic Church there. We had a parish that we went to, and there was a Haitian community there that allowed us to tether to a culture in a meaningful way. Um, but at the same time, my parents were knowing that they're coming to a place that was different than the country they came from, and they wanted us to be able to effectively assimilate. And so one of the things that they really ensured or tried to ensure is that things like mastery of the English language, being exposed to local culture, were things that actually I remember at a young age informing my youth in ways that I didn't expect. And so, did my elementary school, grew up with a small group of kids that came from the suburbs. I came from the inner city. Then fifth grade came around, and I went to middle school in in Connecticut as well, another private school, and then I had the opportunity to go to a college preparatory school, Fairfield Prep. And throughout that, I'd say there were multiple seasons of understanding and growth and exposure. And I would say that I grew up in riding two rails, right? There's a rail of my home life. My parents got their citizenship when I was about 7 or 8 years old, maybe a little older. I remember fondly helping my mom to study for the citizenship exam. And, you
Okay.
know, that was an amazing opportunity for me to see them grow and learn. you don't really get a sense that you don't always get a chance to see your parents in that like I don't know phase, and it's seeing them move into that I know phase. And so that rail was very much informed by like our culture experiences. Um, and then I had my outside of the home rails. So my at home, I'm speaking, I'm listening to Creole music, I'm eating Haitian food, I'm understanding how to move through the world as a Haitian man. And outside of the home, I'm assimilating. I'm walking around with kids that, you know, they will have cable TV. They go to each other's homes and they have sleepovers, and
Yeah,
their
yeah,
parents
yeah.
help them with their homework and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about sort of where those two trajectories kind of parallel. And
Hmm.
that's what it was like growing up.
And what were like some of the pressures that you had carried as an immigrant, a child, and a child of an immigrant? You know, what I'm saying parents. You know, what were some of the pressures like growing up?
Yeah, so you stand on the shoulders of giants, right? At the end of the day, and so it was known to me at a very young age that they made sacrifices for me to be in those places. Um, so that there's expectations, right? Because those sacrifices they influence things like one could argue that they delayed your ability to purchase a home, right? Because maybe the down payment wasn't as strong for purchasing a house. There are certain expectations that I had to alter serve, which I have fond memories about. And I was fortunate enough to be at a church that didn't really deal with a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, when I was able to build a sense of meeting the bar around what they expected good to
Okay.
be. And that was both interpersonal, so strengthening my faith in the church, but also trying to get as good grades as possible. And I definitely would say that I had uh, some non-neurotypical behavior, and I think that was very much informed. I wouldn't self-diagnose, but more like when you grow up in an 800 by 800 square foot home with your parents and you're in that, um,
Mm.
you try to find ways for you to like feel free, right? To do the things that other kids are doing, and I think that sometimes created a tension, but it also taught me how to be resourceful, right? And I could get to that, later in the conversation. So that's really what that meant. It meant getting good grades, um, being being a good member of the faith in the church, being a good
Yeah.
older brother, and being a translator, for my parents
Hmm.
when needed.
I do like how you're highlighting a few things. One is something that's constantly coming up in this conversation is faith. You know, I
Mm.
admire you for that, right? I feel like when we can look at something past ourselves and look towards it and say, hey, look, you're leading me and I'm not leading myself. I feel like that's very important because in times of disparity, you know, we can't just always lean on ourselves for the answer. There always has to be another light that comes to us. So I do admire the fact that you do highlight the word faith and how important it is, not only within the Haitian culture, but also in your household. And I think another thing that obviously stands out in this conversation, which you're highlighting a lot of great things, is education, right? And I feel like a lot of our immigrant parents and grandparents, you know, they might have not have that had that opportunity to get that education, to be able to go to boarding school or Catholic school or private school, and then a private Catholic institution, and then go on to their master's degrees and stuff like that. They probably didn't have those opportunities, but they have fought so hard for us to get that. And when you were talking about the schools that you were bouncing around to, and you're like, and not in a bad way, but just like moving up that ladder, it just makes me say like, wow, like, you know, that might have not been the case if his parents didn't push that hard to get that. You know, that and it comes back to the word sacrifice, right? And the amount of sacrifice that was needed in order to provide that opportunity for both you and also your sister. So I ask you this question now, like when growing up, I could only assume it could possibly be these two individuals, but you might have somebody else in mind as well. Growing up, were there any role models?
Yeah, yeah, tons, tons. Um, I'd say obviously my parents are my first two role models, right, in developing who I am. But I had the opportunity to have my grandmother live with us. When I was able to like form memories and build a relationship with her, um, and she is amazing. Um, she could not read and write. She's actually from like by the definition of literacy, she would be considered illiterate, like in the United States. But her mind was amazing. She's 103 and she's still alive, and
Let's
her mind
go.
is still sharp. Let's go, right? I love
Let's
that.
go.
And I would have to say that, you know, seeing her navigate through the world at her age was probably one of the most inspiring things that I could see. We've all grown up hearing the aphorism, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I've never seen someone flip that on its head as hard as she has. And she continues to do that today. Uh, I mean, talk about neuroplasticity at 103. She can recall new people and she references them. And I think that that comes from practice, exercise. She made sacrifices. She was agrarian. Her and her husband, they started as living an agrarian lifestyle in Haiti, farmers, and they raised um, my mother in a lot of ways to have the opportunity to go and learn. My mom was able to finish her studies and get up to the level to be a teacher in Haiti. And then she immigrated to the US so that she could actually give me those opportunities as well. And so, I think that like that for me made things contextual in a way that in by
Mhm.
her decisions, the ripples of those have this level of impact on me, on my day to day. Um, I had some sports role models as well. I think, as an 80s baby, MJ posters were probably on all of our walls at
Wait,
one
hold on.
point.
We don't. Which MJ you talking about right now?
Michael,
Let's get Michael
but that's
Jordan.
true. That's fair. I'm talking about
Right?
Jordan, but there is Jackson as well, right? That's
Okay,
true.
I'm
That's
just
fair.
making
That's
sure.
fair.
Making sure.
That's
Like,
true.
hey, look, you
Yeah,
said
it's true.
sports, but
That's
dance could
true.
be a sport now.
Dance is a
Dance is a
sport.
sport.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. 100%. Would never take that away from it. Yeah, for sure. I had an MJ. We had MJ records. We had Michael
Okay.
Jordan posters. Yeah,
Come on. Come
yeah.
on. Come on.
So yeah, no, 100%. And I think that that really helped me to see people that look like me, right?
Yep.
Overcoming their own personal adversities, um, excel like at the highest level. And I'll be really honest with you, like even as I espoused the value of education and having the opportunity to go to these different schools and institutions, I would argue that I probably took them for granted to some degree. I was very invested in the journey of learning, and I don't know if I necessarily understood in those moments what I was being offered, but I would say that the spirit of tenacity I was able to like to capture, and that afforded me the ability to navigate those spaces in ways that had a ton of unlocks. So I had teachers along the way that really helped me. I had a math teacher in seventh grade. Her name was Miss Paez. She was phenomenal, probably one of my favorite teachers of all time. She saw me for who I was. She was the first uh, non non-white person as that I had as a teacher. She was a person of
Oh
color.
wow.
Uh,
Wow.
she was um, she was a Latina.
And
Um,
what grade was this?
seventh grade. Seventh
So
grade.
you said until seventh grade, you didn't see someone of color in the front
Not
line
I
teaching
I didn't
in
retain it. I
your
mean, I
class.
had yeah, I had like I think like nursery school. I think I had a couple of women there, and maybe my early years like kindergarten and so forth. But she was the one that I think stuck out for me as
Yeah.
she was a
Okay.
very
Okay.
much she had a direct impact on the grades I got, and
Shout out
I
to that.
spent a lot of time with her. Yeah. And then along the way, I had teachers that popped into my life that have been super helpful, and then a lot of my peers. I've been fortunate enough to maintain friendships with peers from elementary school, some peers from high school, college, right? And so those have also influenced me. So I've had a lot of role models for sure
Okay.
along the way.
And it's important that we understand that it's not just one person that's going to get us there. And
100%.
as you climb up that ladder each time, each year, each month, each day, to be honest with you, you might need somebody else to be a role model. And then, and sometimes it's good to have several different role models and several different mentors, but you just got to find the right people for you. right? And I think those role models kind of help pave the way for you, and it's obviously helped pave the way for your where you are right now. Like, could you just growing up, you know, and now where you are working? So, could you give us a little bit of an understanding of like your current role and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm a founder of a company called 40 Launch. It's an agency. It's built off of all of my experience over, I started in tech once I got a compact Presario in my room when I was 13, 14 years old. I taught myself Visual Basic, C++, Perl, CGI. I was very curious. Spent a lot of time in that 800 square foot box. So the internet was actually a window to the rest of the world. So went down a lot of rabbit holes to learn a lot of those things. So my background is firmly in tech. I started on the creative side. Uh, First half of my career was design, UX, and a lot of the psychology around tech, and then the latter half was product management, and with stints in the more technical roles and being a co-founder previously. And so 3 years ago, I started this company because I've seen from go-to-market strategy all the way to execution. In the time of AI, there's never been a more amazing time for people to start their own businesses, to uh, develop a skill that is critical and meaningful. We're surrounded by a lot of change, but I saw that 3 years ago that the change was coming in ways that we couldn't even comprehend. And
Mm,
that's what I've been developing over the past 3 years, cultivating relationships with different agencies, individuals, companies, to help them go from 0 to 1 and start creating products that are going to be meaningful in the intelligence age.
mm. Is that one of the in regards to the 30? I know you launched like 30 companies. Is that correct across the industry?
It's more like I've launched like 30 discrete like product types. I've worked from everything from third-party risk intelligence tools to music distribution products to fintech products to edtech products. It across all of these, I'd be able to bring products to market uh, that touch consumers or users or customers in very meaningful and deep ways. A core tenet of the product management function is knowing your user, getting really close to them. And part of that means you understand their problems, their pain points. And I think that a big part of that is informed by my upbringing. I grew up being a translator between the culture that I had at home and a culture that existed outside of that home. And it
True for
created
sure.
a muscle that really enabled me to come into conversations and see things from very different perspectives, and the speed allows me to do the second, third order thinking that allows me to take that knowledge and information
Mm-hmm.
in a way
Now,
that's strategic.
through all of your wins, obviously launching companies and stuff like that, products as well. There had to be a moment of like uncertainty, right? What was like the
Mhm.
hardest part in your professional journey where you had to really like question yourself along this way?
It's really easy to be comfortable. I think that I started really diving into the corporate space like when I was in my mid to late 20s. I was really, I liked the idea of just being a bit more flexible, and I'm more interested in learning. And then once I made a commitment to investing in my career, I had to confront the nuances of that, and part of that I just didn't know was coming in my direction. I used to say things like I'm authentic, that you know, uh, I don't play politics. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
go. I just want to go in and do work. Sometimes just put your head down and stuff like that. And I was of the mindset that it was if you if you do the work and you do a good job, it will show, right? Like there was a meritocracy, and it took me a while, maybe longer than some, to really get to a point where I understood that your story's being written with or without you, right?
Say that
And
again.
so, yeah, and so when you confront that reality, it starts to make you look at the facets of your decision less through a lens of judgment and more through a lens. And when I say judgment, I don't mean good judgment. I mean um, talk, allowing yourself to think that you shouldn't do something because of how you'll be perceived, right? Understanding the nuances of like why you make decisions and where you attribute the reasoning. All of these things start to inform how you want to show up in the world. And authenticity now becomes a question of, are you able to show up doing the things that you want the way you want? And is it actually going to yield the results because you are being authentic in your approach, right? So the challenges for me have been leaving my spaces of comfort, spending time at a company, learning how to do it, learning the ins and outs, and then realizing I need more. I need to do more. I feel like I can contribute more, and taking that career leap of faith and saying, okay, I'm going to go to this role. It's a bit of a reach role. And one thing I realized really early in my career, I wanted to make up ground for whatever reason. I had motivations. Um, I I like the idea of failing up, and I think that that's something, as people are watching this, is um, failure is just a mindset. At the end of the day, you're going to fit or you're not going to fit. Certain things are going to happen or they're not going to happen. But at the
True.
end of the day, your ability to meet the goals that you have, because you have the core responsibility yourself, and mm, assuming that risk to take on more than you feel allows you to grow. And so taking that path allowed me to take on responsibilities that maybe at times I wasn't ready for, but they forced me to grow. And as I've grown, I've started collecting a lot of that insight and knowledge. I have started learning how to avoid them. The risk
Mm,
became realer and it allowed me to navigate them more effectively, allowed me to make more decisions more effectively. And, I think that now I approach scenarios, conversations with frameworks that have been more effective. So, I know your question was, when did I face like a big challenge? I face it all the time. I face it today still. Uh, I think the impact of it early on was they'd set me back hard. I take it personal. Maybe the
okay,
company
okay,
didn't
fair,
go what
fair.
I do, or the job that I went into wasn't what I expected, and I took it personally, and I didn't get along. Um, I remember going from like I was at a company called Ovation Ticks, and I was going to KPMG. I was very excited. I was ready for the role in my mind, and I realized that uh, despite the fact that I knew what I was doing as from a product management function, I love speed. I love moving fast. I love building things quickly and learning how to work. And I was in a corporate scenario that didn't move the same way. And
Yeah.
in that moment, I looked at it as, well, maybe I'm not good enough. But in
Mm,
retrospect, I realized I was a round peg in a square hole, right? Yeah, it just didn't fit. With my experience now, I can navigate that because I've gotten the experience to understand what that means. But at the time,
yeah.
I was looking at it through a different lens. So I have countless stories of the same vein, but the difference now is I'm able to determine where the gaps are. Right?
Mm-hmm. And you're mentioning something very important right there. Like you had to go through it to understand it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's no way possible to get better, to get stronger, to be wiser if we don't attack it, right? Meet it head on, right? And there's going to be those rooms that we don't want to be in. There's going to be
Yeah.
those individuals that we definitely don't want to connect with because of their energy and their ignorance that they might have. But when we're in that situation, I like how you said it. You said now you have the framework to achieve greatness in there, whether it be in that conversation, whether in that dispute, whether in that room that should be a safe space but it's not a safe space. You have the framework. Taking things personal, I think that's something that we all do in the beginning, and probably still to this day. But knowing that you have to have thick skin, right? And as immigrants, first generation or second generation immigrants, especially with the world of today, you got to find a way to kind of like separate that and be like, what am I focusing on? What am I doing? How can I be better? And whether it be through education, whether it's through faith, whether it's through great community, whether it's, keeping your head down and working hard, you just got to find out what it is. And when it comes down to your potential and your confidence, where do you think is the biggest gap when you were thinking of talking about all that?
Yeah. I think that everyone has potential, at the end of the day. And I think that it's language that I'm going to be very careful because we hear it all the time. When there's a gap between your perception and your delivery, there's going to be someone who's going to try and make sense of that. And sometimes your delivery is not able to be demonstrated in the space that you're in.
Yep.
And people might assume that you can do more, but the reality is you're overcoming like other challenges, right? Like as a first generation not only a first generation American, I'm a first generation professional in a lot of ways. Um, I have a white collar job. Now, my dad had a white collar job as well, but it was just a little bit different in a sense that he didn't navigate politics the way that I had to. And
Mm.
I put myself in certain rooms that, quite honestly, sometimes I was like, I didn't even know how I got here, or I shouldn't even be here, right?
Yeah, you start questioning. You're like, wait, hold
You
on, hold
say,
on.
what's going
You looking
right,
around the room, be like, mm-hmm,
right,
mm-hmm.
right. And that says something, A, about like, okay, what it is that you put there to do, but also how do you navigate that? And a big part of that is understanding is understanding what your goal and what you're trying to
Yeah,
accomplish. And so, my gaps between was it confidence and
the potential.
potential is that your potential is limited by your perceived understanding of like what you're capable of. And so I'm taking that off the table. Like your potential is limitless at the end of the day. Confidence, it's something that you just need to balance. It's something that definitely comes with experience, but it's not the experience to know how you can do things, but being able to sit in the unknown and not be afraid and not allow your mindset to take over your behavior and actions. Don't freeze. Like we freeze sometimes because we don't want to write that email because we think that if we don't write it perfectly, then the person on the other side is going to judge us. And if I do it in front of too many people, someone's going to offset my credibility. And the thing is, you need to sit in your power and realize that, well, you've made that decision for a reason. And if you feel that you don't feel confident in it, ask yourself the question and then take your time. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with taking your time, right? And that's something I definitely have to learn. And so it's been there's still gaps, but they're just a little bit different now. I think my confidence and potential gaps are really a perception of like my of how much I understand the scenario that I'm getting myself into.
And throughout your journey, do you feel like there was a point in time where you felt like you had to prove yourself? And like when did you stop trying to prove yourself? Like and fully trust like within your instincts and like more importantly as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, that's a something that we all have to deal with. It's human. You always want to be in a position where you feel that the information and what you're providing is meaningful. So, uh, I think I still deal with that in some ways, but primarily, I think that a lot of uh, the edge has been dulled by at bats. I take a lot of at bats. I make every day an at bat. I challenge myself to learn more about my business, learn more about my market, talk to people, and so those influence those perceptions. Uh, yeah, I think that's how I'm looking at that. I kind of got lost in sort of how I was explaining it. So can you repeat that question one more time, just so I can make sure I'm giving you
No worries.
the response it needs?
Proving yourself, like
Proving
along
yourself.
the
Yeah.
way, like you obviously had to. There was times where you probably had to say to yourself like, I have to keep proving myself every time I step into this room. I got to keep showing people who I am, why I belong in this space. Obviously there might have been some imposter syndrome along the way, but when did you stop saying to yourself, I have to stop proving myself and believe in and trust in your potential?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that's ever really stopped. I think that I'm always trying to prove myself to myself at the end of the day. Right. I think a big part of being comfortable with that, and that's where what I was saying about like the double-edged sword is that there's still the young version of me that I deal with, the one that, was going into the middle school for the first time and doesn't have any friends, and it's a completely different school, completely different people, completely different way of working and operating. And that kid is, that kid's still there. Sometimes he gets scared, but now there's an adult there with him. That there's an adult version of me that says it's okay. It's normal to be faced with the unknown and have uncertainty. And that doesn't mean that you need to puff up your chest in the scenario and be something that you're not. It means that you get to expand in ways that are opportunistic to you, or learn and grow, right? And so, yeah, proving myself, I think, is something that I've just reframed as um, showing up. I think that's an aphorism a lot of people have said is like 80% of showing up. And I didn't really understand what that meant until later in my career. Um, but it means showing up in every way. It just doesn't mean like getting into it doesn't mean that, like going to work 80% of the year. It means you would get an email, just write the draft, or not be resistant to the decisions that you need to make. And a big part of helping that was therapy. That's something that is not really um, commonly used as a tool that I grew up with or in the culture I come from, but it's been immensely helpful in me sort of being able to dive a little bit deeper into my own thoughts and insecurities and surface those things. And so, um, yeah, it's about help. That's definitely one thing that I'd say is critical.
Mhm. And if I had to give you this last question, in a sense, like what is like your perspective? When immigrants, professionals listen to this, like they're in survival mode, right? They're trying to just find their way through it. What is some of the tactics or tools you can give to them when it comes to like patience, timing, and really just pursuing this a long career journey?
Yeah. Um, just respect the fact that you're constantly moving. Sometimes you're over your toes, and sometimes you're on your heels, and sometimes you're perfectly stood straight up, and you're fine. You're well balanced, and none of those states is permanent.
True.
And being comfortable with the understanding that when you are in those scenarios, don't hesitate to ask for help. I think that that's something that people don't do. Coming off the heels of that last question, some people find it in their faith, through therapy, through talking to their peers, to a mentor, through whatever, a personal entertainment path that you enjoy, video games, whatever it may be. There are channels for you to like kind of unlock that spigot. And I'm not going to judge the channels. But what I'll say is there are moments that give you the opportunity to be introspective and it allows you to slow down your thoughts. I find that when I'm thinking too far in the future and I'm getting anxious, um, that means I'm failing to anchor myself in the present because I'm over in, estimate or over indexing on like what the risks may be. When I'm too far in the past, you know, I need to anchor myself in those things that I need to be in the present because I'm overthinking the regrets or what may have been or what could have been. And just trying to keep yourself in that middle ground affords you the opportunity to see what's in front of you. And it's an opportunity for you to say, oh, you know what? This is something that I need. If you're
Yeah.
overwhelmed, you have too many things on your plate, you're afraid you're going to get hip. Well, okay, look, break it down. Like, look outside of
Yeah.
yourself and step away from it because it's not a judgment of you as an individual. It's a demonstrative of your relationship to the organization. Maybe the organization failed you. Maybe you didn't get the training you need. Maybe they didn't put you in the right place. Maybe you didn't get the mentorship that you needed. And identifying that, look at that as an